You actually highlighted the clause with a yellow marker? He said, smirking like he'd just caught me finger painting. Laughter rippled around the conference table. Polite, muffled, corporate laughter. My jaw didn't move. My heart didn't speed up. I simply put a small black X beside his name in my mental log. 14 years in that company had taught me how to smell rot long before it started leaking. The new VP was named Evan Brooks, and of course he was. There's always an Evan. Fresh-pressed blazer, sockless loafers, haircut from some executive confidence salon. He'd swaggered into Kendrick Systems 8 weeks earlier, straight from a boutique consultancy in Austin, where synergy and optimization were both nouns and battle cries. His resume was all buzzwords and bluff. Mine said one word: compliance. Most of them didn't even know I had a law degree. I didn't broadcast it. I didn't raise my voice when senior staff forgot that VendorNet terms weren't 120 days. I simply attached the proper clause from the procurement regs to my weekly report and let the paper speak for itself. Before we go further, know this. The story ends with a federal auditor walking into a board meeting. So, if you haven't subscribed yet, well, pretend there's a like button in the break room and hit it for the compliance department that keeps your coffee funds clean. Anyway, 14 years, beige cardigans, quiet entrances. I was the kind of person you assumed came with the building. Safe, predictable. Until Evan arrived. Day one, he dropped his duffel in the corner office like it was a gym locker. Didn't shake my hand. Didn't ask what I did. Just pointed at the wall of thick binders behind my desk. Are those like real files? I thought everything was cloud-based now. My eyes smiled. My mouth didn't. 2 weeks later, my invite to the annual vendor audit prep call disappeared. Not an accident. His assistant had CC'd everyone in ops and purchasing and added the tag decision makers only. I watched the notification flash across my monitor like a mosquito I couldn't swat yet. They'd never survived an audit without me. Hell, most of them barely survived a lunch order without my allergen warnings. Evan strutted the halls like he'd invented efficiency itself, carrying coffee cups like props. He used leverage as punctuation. He gave a presentation on agile integration philosophy that sounded like a TED Talk assembled from buzzword fridge magnets. I stayed quiet and took notes when I was quietly replaced on the manufacturing safety subcommittee by someone who once asked, "OSHA, that's the construction guy, right?" I smiled and kept filing. My boss, Tom Whitfield, was useless, an old compliance warhorse turned golf course ornament. Evan had him wrapped around his manicured finger in a week. They'd vanish for strategy lunches and come back smelling like bourbon and bad decisions. Soon, my risk assessments were deemed overly cautious. Translation: I made it harder for them to lie. One morning, I passed the glass conference room during a leadership sync. Evan was mid-story about how he'd closed a deal once by texting a Vince McMahon meme. The room roared. I printed another copy of the whistleblower policy and slid it into the folder I kept at home. They thought I was furniture. They forgot I had teeth. The moment that would undo them started small. 7 careless words between sips of burnt coffee. "Compliance is just paperwork," Evan said. They laughed. I didn't. Conference room C, the icebox, we called it, was freezing enough to refrigerate remorse. I sat 2 seats from Evan, across from a new supplier rep still sweating Monster Energy. The man bragged, "We're still in process of getting listed on the federal vendor database." I blinked once. "So, you're not yet approved under FAR 52.204/21 for handling controlled data?" He hesitated. "Almost there." Evan chuckled. "Come on, compliance is just paperwork." My hand didn't shake. I simply tapped my phone beneath the table, recording 30 perfect seconds. In compliance, silence is a sniper rifle. You don't shout. You document, timestamp, and let the target walk into the shot. 14 years of fixing their mistakes had ended in that one smug laugh. He didn't know it yet, but the bullet was already in the air. After that meeting in the icebox, I didn't storm out. I didn't make a scene. I simply went back to my cubicle, closed the door, and opened the federal vendor database. A quick search confirmed it. The supplier wasn't listed. Then I cross-checked their onboarding docs. 4 missing signatures, 2 redacted attachments, and 1 line marked compliance verified entered 3 days before the meeting even happened. Someone had marked them green before they were eligible. I stared at the screen until my tea went cold. Then I opened a blank email. Recipient, investigator at ofp.gov. Subject, vendor onboarding irregularity. Contract ID H75129C. Attachment, a 29-second audio file. Body text, please see attached recording from internal vendor review. Regards. That was it. No signature, no company logo, no footer. Just the truth, quiet and clean. I sent it from my personal laptop, parked in the far corner of the underground garage where the lights flickered on a 3-second delay. The hum of the vending machine was the only witness. When I hit send, I didn't feel triumph, not fear either, just stillness, the kind that happens when something fragile finally breaks. By the next morning, I had a new request in my inbox from a routine federal compliance sweep, asking for documentation of recent vendor onboarding tied to grant-funded projects. The list of requested files was surgical, they already knew. Someone had listened to the clip. At 10:03 a.m., I passed Evan in the hallway. He was lecturing our legal intern about how regulation kills innovation. I kept walking. I had a binder to build. By noon, the procurement department was in chaos. Someone had forwarded the audit notice to the entire floor with the subject line, Urgent, Contract H75129C Review. Then silence. That silence was delicious. People forget that silence has weight. It presses on guilt like a thumb on a bruise. At 5 p.m., I was still there when Evan wandered past, sipping cold brew from a whiskey flask because he thought irony was character development. "Hey, Barb," he drawled. "Hearing some noise about that vendor thing? Legal's getting twitchy." "It's probably just a standard review," I said. "Happens all the time." He grinned. "Right. Make sure your boxes are checked." "Always," I said and smiled. When he left, I checked the access logs. His login had touched 6 compliance files in 24 hours. 2 were read-only. He'd tried to edit them anyway. I added that to my off-site folder, printed the page, and slipped it into my physical binder labeled Incident Tracking. External copy. I learned long ago, you can gaslight a person, but not a hard copy. That night, the office was empty except for me and the faint smell of industrial cleaner. I stood by the glass lobby wall, looking at my reflection in the darkened street outside. Not tired, not scared. Just exact. For 14 years, I'd cleaned up after executives who thought compliance was a paper shield. Now, I was building something sharper. The next morning, a new email appeared. Subject, clarification request. Federal vendor oversight. Contract H75129C. Body, please provide confirmation of internal protocols and verification documentation. No further action required at this time. That line, no further action required, was the biggest tell in the business. It meant action was already underway. I watched as the message landed in the inboxes of legal, operations, and procurement. But not mine. I only knew about it because Margaret from Vendor Relations, who smelled perpetually of microwaved tilapia, forwarded it with the note. Thought you should see this. She didn't meet my eyes all day. By afternoon, Evan was walking around with his phone out, laughing. "Anyone else see that weird email from the feds? Probably some intern trying to flex." The room chuckled. Again. Everything was a joke until the subpoena arrived. Later that week, I went to print a report from my usual printer. Access denied. Tried again, denied. Someone had removed my badge access, but only for that one printer. Not the HR one, not legal's, just mine. It was petty, intentional, the kind of power move people like Evan think is subtle. I stood there a moment, watching the machine hum like it was mocking me. Then I walked back to my desk, opened my private log, and typed, Event 42, printer access revoked. Finance pod. Timestamp, 11:13 a.m. No justification provided. Save. Print. File. They thought they were isolating me. They were actually blinding themselves. Because when people stop including you, they forget you can still see everything. And I was watching. Every edit, every login, every whisper. They thought I was decoration. I was already writing the audit's opening statement. By the next week, the air in the office had changed. The kind of tense, oversweet smell of panic masked with citrus spray. Slack messages slowed. Meetings rescheduled. Doors closed faster when I walked by. Silence was the new dress code. Then came the breadcrumbs. Anonymous DMs from coworkers. Late-night screenshots sent by mistake. A note slipped under my office door, written in careful all caps. Did you see that Chase, no, Evan, edited the onboarding doc retroactively? Legal's asking questions. The house wasn't burning yet, but I could feel the floorboards warm beneath my feet. I stopped watching for exits and started mapping load-bearing walls. It hit legal first. Wednesday, 9:02 a.m. The espresso machine hissed like a starting pistol, and then an email from the Office of Federal Procurement Audits arrived. No vagueness this time. Please provide full documentation of vendor approval workflows, internal risk assessments, and compliance logs related to Contract H75129C. Include date-stamped records from 03/01/05/18 and all login data tied to document edits. Response due within 48 hours. No thank you, no further action, just a deadline sharp enough to cut fingers. I watched panic move through the glass walls like weather. A paralegal sprinted past, clutching a legal pad. The general counsel appeared seconds later, phone to ear, eyebrows forming the architecture of a crisis. 2 minutes after that, an email landed in my inbox. Barb, do you by chance retain backup logs from Q1, Q2 vendor reviews? Of course I did. The analog ones. I opened the binder labeled Q1 Vendor Integrity Chain, flipped past neatly tabbed sections, checklists, signatures, printed email threads, and found the red flag memo Evan had ignored back in March. Supplier currently unlisted under Federal Approval Database. Do not onboard until verified. I scanned it, attached it, replied with one sentence. See attached logs for requested range. No commentary, no emotion. Paper speaks louder. By noon, the CTO had summoned his crisis trio, legal, ops, and Evan, into his office. The calendar entry popped up. Emergency Risk Exposure Review, 6 p.m. At 5:47, I got a reschedule notice for my Thursday budget meeting. Translation: hide the evidence. I stayed late. The floor emptied. At 6:13, I saw them exit. Legal pale, CTO glassy-eyed, Evan still grinning, but with his tie crooked and his confidence leaking. Cracks forming. I logged it mentally. Next morning, my badge still didn't work at the printer, but it printed fine at HR's machine. So I printed everything. Server logs, access trails, timestamp conflicts. I built a new binder, 1 tab per executive who'd touched the vendor file. No opinion, just chronology. One final divider. Projected exposure. Friday, the procurement Slack channel went silent. No memes, no chatter. That's when Jeremy, a junior IT tech, showed up looking like he'd swallowed a USB stick sideways. Weird thing, he stammered. Did you run any permission changes on Evan's files? No, I said. Why? Logs show admin overrides from your account. Might be a glitch. A glitch. Sure. After he left, I pulled my own audit log. Someone had cloned my credentials and tried to edit a compliance doc. Failed because my system generated dual-factor paper backups. I printed the proof, stapled it to a note. Tampering attempt. Stage 1. Filed it under retaliation. Active. Friday night, 10:42 p.m. The janitors were gone. Audit trail. Ping. Unauthorized VPN access into my drive labeled Federal Ready. H75129C. Session length, 42 seconds. Long enough to panic, not long enough to understand. I didn't report it. I wrote it down in ink. Ink doesn't glitch. Monday morning, HR called. Carol, the HR rep who decorated her office with motivational cat posters, smiled like turbulence in human form. "Barb," she began, "we wanted to discuss a potential development opportunity. That phrase belongs on OSHA's list of workplace hazards." She handed me a memo printed in HR sans. "We believe your experience would be invaluable in a new role. Strategic Culture and Values Coordinator. Translation: exile with benefits. Keep her paycheck, kill her access. Avoid the whistleblower clause." I read it twice. "Will this affect my credentials?" I asked. "Oh, we're still finalizing that," she said, voice just a shade too quick. I smiled. "Wonderful. May I have a printed copy for my records?" She blinked. "I printed 2. One for HR, one for me. Time-stamped, badge ID in the corner. Filed under attempted reassignment. Phase 1. That afternoon, facilities asked if I'd like to move my desk closer to the new culture pod. I declined politely and logged the time. No one said a word when I walked the halls. People looked away mid-sentence. Even the coffee machine hissed quieter when I passed. Evan stopped by once, tapping my desk with his knuckle. "Nothing personal," he said. "Realignment. We all play to our strengths." I looked up. "Thanks for the feedback. I've been documenting everything." Half a second of silence, half a second where his grin froze. That was enough. By Wednesday morning, my inbox was a graveyard of silence. No replies, no invites. My name had vanished from every recurring meeting I used to lead. Vendor oversight? Gone. Operation sync? Gone. Even the Thursday compliance huddle, the one I'd started myself, now showed event deleted by organizer. When your presence makes people nervous, they pretend you don't exist. That's when you know you're winning. At 7:19 a.m., a new email slid into my inbox. No subject, no header, just a single line. "They're moving your folders." Attached was a screenshot from Jeremy in IT. Blurred, grainy, but enough. A request to disable my cloud sync privileges had been filed under redundant data cleanup. Signed not by IT, not legal, not even Evan. Facilities. They were laundering the sabotage now, routing deletion orders through people who thought compliance chain was a new desk layout. Neat, cowardly, and sloppy. I smiled. They didn't understand how deep my redundancies ran. Every compliance file I'd ever touched lived on 3 drives, one internal, one encrypted offsite, one mirrored on a private terminal in my apartment. I didn't just back up data. I shadowed it. I was the redundancy. Still, the intent was clear. Erase me. At 6:12 p.m. Thursday, an email arrived. No greeting, no footer. Just, "Thank you. See you tomorrow." It came from Evan, short, sharp, meaningless on the surface, but it read like a trigger pulled. I closed my laptop, locked my binders in the cabinet, and, for the first time in months, left the building while the sun was still up. At home, I poured a glass of red wine, lit a candle, dropped the weight of the day like an old file on a closed case. Then I slept with my phone off, because I already knew. Friday morning felt heavy, like the air had mass. People whispered, then stopped when I walked past. No one made eye contact. Even the fluorescent lights seemed dimmer. Evan wasn't in yet. Odd. He was usually the first to strut in, spinning that stupid reusable cup like a trophy. 8:36 a.m. Security buzzed the front desk. I watched from the mezzanine window as a black federal sedan pulled up to the curb. Out stepped a man in a gray government-issue suit, crisp enough to slice paper. He carried two things, a laptop and a small portable speaker. He didn't smile, didn't chat with reception, just flashed his badge and nodded toward the elevator. I followed, casually, like coincidence. The elevator doors closed, and I caught a glimpse of the ID clipped to his belt. Office of Federal Procurement Audits, top floor, executive boardroom. The quarterly strategy session was already in progress. CEO, CFO, CTO, legal, and yes, Evan Brooks, who'd slunk in 10 minutes late, looking like he hadn't slept since the word audit was invented. I wasn't invited, of course not. But there's a frosted partition outside the boardroom, half glass, half privacy theater. Stand 2 feet to the left and you can see everything without being seen. I'd learned that trick years ago. At 9:01 a.m., the federal auditor entered. Set the laptop down, connected the speaker, pressed play. Evan's voice filled the room, crystal clear. "Come on, compliance is just paperwork." The silence afterward was volcanic. The CFO leaned back, color draining. Legal froze mid-breath. The CTO's mouth hung slightly open, as if recalculating his entire pension. And the CEO, Mr. Charles Denham III, a man who insisted everyone include the third on formal emails, didn't move at all. Just stared at the speaker like it had insulted his bloodline. The auditor let the echo fade, then turned his laptop toward the CEO. I couldn't hear the volume anymore, but I could read the lips. "Explain this." Not, "Can you explain?" Not, "Please clarify." Just explain. Evan tried to speak, raised a finger, stopped, tried again. Silence. Legal leaned in toward the CEO, whispering fast. The CEO looked like he wanted to melt through the mahogany table. That's when the auditor finally spoke aloud, loud enough even for me, from the hallway. Who oversaw compliance for this vendor? Every head turned, not toward Evan, but toward the one empty chair at the table. Mine. And then the CEO spoke, voice small, almost reverent. "Where's Barbara?" A board member, one who'd once called me paper wallpaper, stood, walked to the door, and opened it. "Ms. Parker," he said quietly, "would you join us, please?" I didn't rush, didn't smile, just gathered my binder, straightened my cardigan, and stepped into the room like I'd been there all along. The silence followed me in, louder than any accusation. The boardroom smelled like panic pretending to be professionalism, citrus air freshener, burned coffee, and fear. The portable speaker still sat in the middle of the table, quiet now, but heavy with the ghost of Evan's voice. I could feel every pair of eyes land on me as I crossed the threshold. The federal auditor, badge glinting under the LED light, turned toward me. "Ms. Parker?" "Yes." "You oversaw compliance during the onboarding of vendor Delta Resin LLC?" "I did. And you raised concerns regarding their approval status?" "Yes, multiple times, documented in emails and vendor review logs." He nodded once. No judgment, no warmth, just process. "Please join us." A chair slid back beside Legal. She looked grateful to have somewhere else for the spotlight to fall. I sat, placed my slim binder on the table, and unzipped it slowly. "This is a summary," I said, sliding 10 crisp pages forward. "Compliance assessment logs, onboarding records, signature trails, and the updated vendor status from March 6th. The yellow highlights mark discrepancies. The appendix includes login timestamps for all document edits. The room went still. The only sound was paper turning. Legal scanned a page, froze. The CFO's pen hovered midair. The CTO frowned, tapping a line with his finger. "This login, is that from your account?" he asked carefully. I shook my head. "Spoofed. The audit log caught the conflict. Reported internally. No action taken." The CFO looked up. "You flagged this in March?" "Correct. And no one followed up?" "None that I was copied on. Mr. Brooks redirected the workflow through facilities, which doesn't have compliance clearance." That last sentence landed like a hammer. The auditor closed the binder with quiet finality and turned to the CEO. "Mr. Denham, you will provide the full compliance chain for this vendor and any others onboarded under your VP's supervision in the last 6 months. If this mindset," he gestured at the silent speaker, "is systemic, the penalties will be substantial." Charles Denham III swallowed hard. His face had gone the color of old paper. Legal tried to interject, words tripping over one another, preliminary, context, isolated incident, but the auditor didn't even glance her way. "Your values," he said coldly, "are not under audit. Your practices are." Evan sat 2 seats down, posture collapsing, jaw tight, eyes darting like a trapped animal. His tan had gone gray. The man who once used leverage like punctuation couldn't find a single word to leverage now. The CEO attempted a weak pivot. "We fully intend to cooperate." "I'm sure you do," said the auditor, unblinking. He turned back to me. "Ms. Parker, we'll need unrestricted access to all compliance documentation moving forward. You'll coordinate directly with my office during the internal audit." I nodded once. Understood. No one objected. Not legal, not ops, and definitely not Evan. He was staring down at the table as if it could offer him legal counsel. The meeting adjourned 20 minutes later with no goodbyes. The executives scattered like dry leaves. The auditor packed his laptop with methodical calm, gave me the faintest nod. Not gratitude, not even approval, just acknowledgement. Recognition between 2 people who both knew the difference between silence and submission. At 4:41 p.m. that same Friday, an email hit the company-wide inbox. Subject line, Leadership Update. Body, effective immediately, Evan Brooks, VP of Operations, is placed on administrative suspension pending an independent investigation into federal compliance violations. Questions may be directed to legal or the interim compliance oversight chair. No signature. No thank you for your service. Just a digital guillotine. They didn't write my name in that email, but everyone knew who the interim chair was. I walked the floor like a ghost turning solid. Keyboards went quiet as I passed. Conversations stalled mid-sentence. No one dared mention the speaker in the boardroom or the word paperwork again. Evan's glass-walled office was dark. By 5:05, the nameplate was gone, the door code disabled. He hadn't even packed his mug. I paused outside, fingers brushing the cool metal of the frame. Same spot I'd stood 14 years ago, invisible, underestimated, called background texture. Now the office was empty. But the system was finally alive. When I got back to my desk, the printer blinked green. My badge worked again. No apology, no announcement, just access restored. The corporate version of confession. I printed exactly one thing. Audit plan, Phase 1. 17 pages. Indexed, annotated. And right at the top, a clause quoted word for word. As per 48 CFR FAR 52-203-13, we are obligated to report any credible evidence of misconduct. For years, that line had been a joke. Now, it was policy. And somewhere in the building, I could almost hear Evan's voice echoing. Compliance is just paperwork, as the printer fed out the pages that would bury him. The following week, Kendrick's systems stopped pretending. No more slogans about synergy. No more framed posters about innovation through collaboration. They came down quietly over the weekend, replaced by something simpler, a notice from the federal auditor's office taped near the elevators. On-site review in progress. Please cooperate with compliance staff. For the first time in 14 years, my department wasn't a footnote. We were the headline. Monday morning, 8:59 a.m. I stepped into the boardroom again. Same glass walls, same smell of disinfectant and recycled fear. But this time, I wasn't standing in the corner. I was standing at the head of the table. The agenda read, Post-Audit Action Plan, presentation by Interim Compliance Chair Barbara Parker. I spoke clearly, slowly. No theatrics, no gloating. Over the past 3 weeks, our review has identified 47 vendor discrepancies, 12 unverified contracts, and multiple data handling violations. We will be self-reporting all of them to federal oversight, as required by law. Not a sound. Even the HVAC seemed to hold its breath. I continued, flipping through the slides. Additionally, we'll establish a standing ethics subcommittee. No more informal approvals. Every sign-off will have dual verification. No exceptions. Legal nodded without argument. Operations took notes. The CFO, pale but obedient, asked, Timeline? 30 days for initial remediation, I said. Failure to comply will result in suspension of departmental privileges. He nodded again. Once. Tight. Controlled. Fear disguised as respect. Halfway through the meeting, a courier arrived. Thick envelope stamped Federal Audit Division. The room tensed. The CEO's replacement, a soft-spoken interim named Renee Alden, signed the receipt and slid it open. She scanned the first page, then exhaled. Half relief, half exhaustion. Preliminary findings, she said quietly. No penalties recommended at this time. Full cooperation noted. Her eyes lifted toward me. They credited the internal reporting structure. Yours, Barbara. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Renee, without the polished indifference of her predecessor, said what no executive ever had before. Thank you.